So please welcome to the stage Alex Ross, Colin Greenwood.
Thank you so much, Jude. Thank you, Colin, for venturing out early this morning, and thank you to all of you for joining us. And so we were originally going to talk, but then what we decided is Colin is going to just go back and jam on all these instruments back here. And I'll stand at the podium and contextualize the sounds as they occur. Let me fire up the computer here. But I thought I'd begin by just telling the story of how Colin and I met, which is sort of oddly wrapped up in this book, which has taken over the South Bank Center like some kind of unpruned vine spreading everywhere. But it was back in 2000 I'd come up with a proposal for this book called The Rest is Noise. Is it okay? Yeah?
It's all good.
And most publishers fled in terror or boredom from the idea, but a couple of publishers did sign on, Farrar, Straus Giroux in America and The Fourth Estate here. So in early 2000, I came over to meet the folks who had signed on, Nicholas Pearson and Christopher Potter, and I had a nice dinner with them. And in the course of the conversation, Radiohead came up, as tends to happen in civilized conversations around the world. And Nicholas mentioned that he knew Colin. Yes. And I was immediately excited and said, I've always wanted to write something about Radiohead. And so Nicholas passed along the top secret America Online email address for Colin. And so we met up later that year when Radiohead thundered through New York on their Kid A tour. And the next year I proceeded to write this big article for the New Yorker, following Radiohead around on a tour which was mostly taking place in Roman amphitheaters in southern Europe, which was quite nice. Colin uttered the immortal line that Radiohead were the E.M. Forster of rock and roll.
Did I say that? Did I really say?
That's what my notes said.
I suppose so. That's right. And Panama, making sketches of antique views on the crumbling ruins.
Exactly. So then the article came out, and despite some minor absurdities strewn through the text, Colin and I stayed in touch, and have spent many, many hours, possibly hundreds of hours, sitting in Colin's kitchen with our computers, playing bits and pieces of music and chatting about it.
Each other.
So when South Bank came up with the idea of having us appear together, we thought we would repeat that ritual for the possible edification of the London musical public.
Yes.
So we'll see how it goes. But we'll just chat about all kinds of things. We have an approximate game plan here.
And as well as seeing Alex pop up around the world on tour. Arena in Bullring in Bilbao to the Seattle side of a canyon in Seattle where we were playing. The Gorge. Alex very kindly has sent me playlists over the years that I've absolutely thrilled to have and have enjoyed, surveys of 20th century classical music, and that I've shared with all my friends, the band, Nigel, our producer, who's here today as well, and that's become part of the musical conversation of Radiohead, and it's been wonderful.
Well, that's very cool for me.
And we'll be listening to some of that music today as well.
I think so. Yeah. There's so many different directions we could go in. Oh, and we also have this.
Yes, we have thing, my brother Johnny, who sadly can't be here because he's shy, more shy than I am.
Yeah, he has on Martineau practice.
He's very kindly submitted a playlist of his favorite, some of his favorite music.
Yeah, which is great. I wish we could just sort of sit here and listen to all this music, and that might be as edifying as anything else. But it includes the Duthiers Onze la Nuit, the Bartók First Piano Violin Concerto, George Crumb, A Haunted Landscape, Chelsea's Ahoy, Dance Figures by George Benjamin, L'Ascension by Messiaen, Penderecki's First Symphony, Tehillim by Steve Reich, the Szymanowski's Stabat Mater, and Darkness Visible by Thomas Addis, which is a great eclectic sort of multi-strained look at the. And
I think I'll put it up on our website later today as well. So if anyone's interested,
so I think we're gonna break in and play a few tracks from that. But I think we sort of wanted to talk about taste in a way, the formation of taste, how our musical tastes evolve in sort of childhood and into adulthood. Talk about divisions in taste sort of within genres, between genres, the pop music, classical music, disputes within 20th century music, which are very much about taste, I think. And then taste as it's being shaped and reshaped by technology and sort of all the recent developments in the digital world. So I feel like that's going to be the sort of theme and variations this morning. Let's just stop and play one of Johnny's tracks just to sort of get things moving. Let's have a bit of lovely Bartók to begin the first piano concerto. Where did it go? There we go. So that's from an almost brand new recording by Isabella Faust with Daniel Harding conducting on the Harmonia Mundi label. So when you were growing up, did you grow up in a household saturated by Bartók?
We grew up in a household where you listened to music on a Sunday. Right. And like most households, and we grew up in an army household in Germany. And so like most households, you had like a little turntable with like a dozen records, probably. And a bunch of classical stuff would be the Schubert Lieder that my parents had, and then more popular things, Brandenburg, and that would be when you would listen to music, and when you'd be together, and then you get in the car and go for the curry and the officer's mess and the James Bond film afterwards, but Sunday would be that music, and that's what we would listen to.
So it really was sort of a classical music type of.
Yeah, my parents were my father especially, but they were he that's what he listened to, and he was very, I use the word conservative, but there wouldn't be pop records in the house.
It's actually quite similar for me. I mean, my parents had a big collection of long playing records and a lot of great recordings from the 40s and 50s, Toscanini, Kusevitsky, lots and lots of Rudolf Serkin, the Trout Quintet, musicians from Marlborough and Mozart concertos and so on. Yes. And that was sort of my musical birthplace, was just sort of listening to all those records. But at some point you must have begun to sort of wander and branch out from there.
Yes, but I really don't think that happened until we went to school, and we had a really amazing music director called Terence James, who's the father-in-law of Mansell Thomas, Welsh composer, and he was the director of music at our school, and he encouraged us as a band, but also, my brother was on a music scholarship to do our own things, and supported us once we were rehearsing early Radiohead. We started when we were 14 years old at the school, and we rehearsed on a Sunday, and the headmaster billed us for £60, and the director of music stormed into the headmaster's office with the bill and tore it up and slammed it on the desk and tore it up and in disgust. So he was a champion, and he came to see us, Terry James, play in Wales about 8 years ago at the arena, and came back stage to the dressing room and proceeded to give us another music lesson. He sort of analysed what we did, how he played, and how it reminded him of we talked about the Poulenc and the Cis. Yes. I'm sure. I think what he was trying to say was what we were doing was we were doing our own thing, right? And not following a train of other people. But he's very important for us as a band.
So, there was a lot of 20th century classical music that he sort of had you listening to.
Although although Johnny did the music O level, their take on popular music was you'd have to analyse a piece of music by Genesis, or what would it be? It would be Bohemian Rhapsody would be what would be considered like a classical musician's idea of a rock song. Right. But I think it's moved on from like 1983 when that was.
Yeah. Now there was one other important early musical encounter that you and Johnny
Yes,
had.
I've got that on my phone.
Yeah. You have to plug in your phone.
Yeah.
This is extremely important.
Do you want to hear this?
I was astonished when Colin played this for me the other day. It really is the secret, long-lost Rosetta Stone of the Radiohead musical.
He was going to play this on Radio 6, but he chickened out on it. But I'm going to play it. But if I can find it. And this is the music that we grew up on the Sunday mornings listening to. Is this called Nina and Frederick, who are a Scandinavian aristocratic couple from the 60s. I don't know if anyone remembers them. And they had this song called The Mango Vendor. And we'll just play it for the first chorus, if it works. If it's playing. No. Here we go. Okay, here we go.
Mango, buy me mango. Came to the market before daylight. Got to sell me mango before the night.
Yeah, it's sort of slightly melancholic.
Yeah, which came through later on in spades.
Yeah. Going into the minor mode.
That's
the fourth degree
exactly.
For a moment.
It's sweet.
So that's where it all came from.
Yep.
Really.
Definitely.
I feel like I need to go back and rewrite my Radiohead article. Yeah. In light of that discovery.
We know where the point of departure is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll unplug that. Yeah. So, but then you were sort of plunging into sort of full on.
Well, you were talking about taste
with the band.
Yeah. And the thing about being in a band, of course, is taste is a way of sort of. It's a very terrifying thing to do, really, because you're sharing things that you like with other people who might not,
right?
And you're trying to explain what you want to do with the music that you're making through things that you like that you can't possibly play yourself either. But they're also ways of describing where you want to end up, and everyone has a different take on things as well, and it's when those sort of ideas of taste become combined, and I explained to my brother, and it's always surprising. You find that the people that you work with haven't heard of things. I remember when my brother hadn't really heard of Kraft. We toured with Kraftwerk, and he wasn't that. And we came backstage after we played the first show with him in Mexico City, and he was like, "This is so wonderful," and it's like we were surprised that he wasn't so aware of it. And or when you try and explain, when you're working on a song, an idea that you might have it sound a certain way, but someone might not have heard of like Moroder, or and you explain how that, and you try and play through the instrument what Moroder might sound like to hit, and then he plays back. It's his understanding of what you're trying to explain. And. So yeah, it's a very strange, sort of torturous, twisted thing.
Yeah, but we were talking, and it was interesting because we were talking about taste, and I was thinking very much in terms of just the sort of the macrocosmic view of just different camps of taste, and how and we're very accustomed to this endless debate in 20th century music, tonality versus atonality, and sort of a more sort of conservative camp versus a more avant-garde leaning camp, and in pop music is very much the sort of the same disputations are at work all the time, and some Radiohead fans might prefer if you just sort of keep going on with sort of the early guitar heavy sound, and others are very enthusiastic about a more electronic saturated sound. So I was thinking of it in those terms, but you were really thinking of it just very much in terms of the internal dynamics of the band, and you're aware of that wider conversation and those different pressures, but the pressures that you really pay attention to are within the band, but which can actually sort of turn out to mirror in some ways those bigger dynamics.
Everyone's working out different agendas, whilst everyone's is relatively incredibly generous about giving people opportunities to explore those ideas of taste within the group. Like you were playing a song called "Climbing Up the Walls," which is on our record OK Computer, because of the strings that Johnny wrote for that.
Well, let's play a bit of that, because I was going to. We can use that to segue into another of Johnny's selections. I'm going to play this is the very end of "Climbing Up the Walls." And this is Jacinto Chelsea. An extraordinary piece from 1966. It just keeps pressing upward and upward and upward in a group of 16 strings. So now with Radiohead, I mean, it's interesting. In rock history, there have been cases before of sort of funny 20th century avant-garde noises entering into rock songs, the Beatles being the classic examples. But then this shift took place with Kid A, where it wasn't sort of just a matter of sort of ornamentally these sounds appearing in the mix of the songs, but sort of a more kind of avant-garde sensibility, or certainly sort of electronic-oriented sensibility, took over the whole record, which caused a certain amount of alarm with Radiohead fans, and there were some that just didn't go for it at all, and really regretted the subsiding of the guitar element. But then there were others who were really thrilled, and that was actually kind of a classical cult of Radiohead, which appeared, I think, between OK Computer and Kid A, and I certainly joined in that period as well, where sort of a lot of composers, conductors, Esa-Pekka Salonen, I think, and jazz people as well just became very excited by this phenomenon of the rock band that was sort of edging into this new territory. I mean, what was it like to sort of live through that curious transition with a certain amount of 20th century scandal, 20th century style music scandal around you?
Well, I think a lot about that record Kid A came about because I think Tom, it's sort of dialogue between Tom and Johnny, really, because I think it was Tom's attempt to move things on with the music away from just guitars, and I think he was listening to a lot of warp and electronic music, and Johnny's contribution to the music was his trying to sort of respond to that challenge in the way that everyone tries to find out what they like about each other's taste, I suppose, and how they can reply to that. So I think the sounds and textures and music that my brother brought to that record was his sort of answer to Tom saying, well, what are we going to do that could be new and different, and I think that's what that was about, and I think it gave the record a sort of, I love that record because it's sort of slow moving, sort of frozen river glacial grandeur about it, but the other thing about our music which is interesting is, apart from Kid A, is that the songs, the actual songwriting as well that Tom does, and the fact that's been taken up by other by classical musicians and jazz musicians, as you say, not just like the sounds and the treatments of Kid A, but Steve Reich doing a radio rewrite. Well, that was one of the songs from Everything Is Right Place, the first song on that record. Which I should also say that Nigel, our producer, who's here, he that was one of the first things that Nigel recorded with Tom, wasn't it? And in Batsford, was it Batsford, wasn't it? In this huge haunted house, wasn't it? In the Gloucestershire countryside, and with the and Nigel and Tom made that the first song on that record. But then but go back to Steve Reich. He selected a song called Jigsaw, Everything Is Right Place, which is sort of like a straight ahead sort of guitar song from In Rainbows rewrite.
So what was it like? You came here to South Bank in March, I believe it was.
That's right.
For the premiere.
That's right.
This, what was it like to hear this giant of modern music sending your songs through the prism of his language?
He had a lot of fans, and there was this queue of mainly men, like snaking up the aisle way with their programs for him to sign, and it's I don't know what was that like. It's just very removed from. It's something that, you know, if you think that you'd have to see again, you'd want to. It needs. I'd like to see it on tour rather than just a single performance. You know, so I think, you know.
But there's an interesting kind of point of contact between you and Steve Reich, because there's a piece that he always mentions, a song that really struck him in the mid-'60s, which is Junior Walker's Shotgun. And it was an example for him of, in a list of various pop songs of that period, where he was very arrested by the sound of music becoming attached to a single harmony that never shifts.
Yes.
And so it's all about what kind of rhythmic energy and sort of the sort of overlapping lines can sort of keep the music moving forward on a single chord. So let's just play a bit of that. Perhaps with volume.
Mike.
So as a bass player, what do you hear as you're listening to this?
I mean, that sounds like everything lots of things that I try to do with Radiohead is in that song as a bass player. Is the repetition and the build-up of tension, and the fact he doesn't go back, he just plays the high A and then goes down to the bottom A just like once right to the end, and it sounds like your speakers are exploding, and it's just and it just sounds very, very modern to me. And you mentioned that you write about, you include that in your book, that song. So you know, because what we do is one of the things we play a lot about within Radiohead are loops and you know, repeated sounds, and that's what I take from that piece of music.
Yeah, can we say something about this, the legendary pop classical divide? Because it's something that sort of preoccupies us in classical music quite a bit, and I suppose as people in the pop world are aware of as well, and sort of attempts to bridge this divide, as we are doing here today.
Well, as Radiohead, the coalface of that Radiohead was when Nigel would attest to this, when we did string sessions back in the day. And you'd get the string players would turn up to record at Abbey Road, and my brother would get highly irked whilst he was watching them like do the crossword and answer their phones whilst they were playing. And I think he calls them, it's like you're playing bubbles or something. Is that right? We do these sort of major chords through the music. You know, these overdubs of sort of pop strings. And so Johnny was very keen to not do that and not use classical musicians in our music in the sort of cliched sort of Beatles sort of power chordage way, you know, and I think that's been one of the great things about the music that the classical music that my brother has introduced to Radiohead, and the time that he's been allowed to develop that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of think back to my own history coming to terms with pop music, which came really, really late, because I stayed really exclusively immersed in classical music right up until my college years, and it was actually really the 20th century that allowed me to enter the pop world sort of by the back door, as it were, because first in college I was really discovering the whole saga of the 20th century in classical music from sort of Schoenberg onward, and then sort of getting heavily into the post-war avant-garde, Zanakis, Ligeti, Stockhausen, and so on. And then I was at this amazing radio station where I was surrounded by brilliant people, and some of them, the most brilliant, were the ones in the punk rock show. And it's like some of the music that they played when I first heard it just sounded sort of completely like nothing was happening. But they were such smart and interesting people that I felt, well, there must be something more here. But what they started pointing out to me was this whole world of underground rock. I mean, the sort of music that just didn't match the stereotype of the pop hit at all, and in which, in fact, you could hear a lot of shared language, shared sensibility with some of the harshest and noisiest avant-garde music, which I was very into at the time. So, for example, they'd play me Per Ubu. So that's 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, and I was very excited to discover this rock band that was quite modernistic and atonal in places, and it was just news to me that you could make such sounds with a rock band. So then I got into the underground rock and indie rock, Sonic Youth, and all that, and then only then sort of did I begin to sort of go backward from there to discover some of the more mainstream mainstream rock history, as well as jazz. But I think it's a perfectly valid way to enter a genre. You don't have to sort of start with the basic stuff. And I find it's interesting. I think people can take this path going the opposite direction. They've grown up with pop, then maybe they've sort of discovered some of the more far out music, and at that point they can make a transition into the 20th century classical repertory and go backward from there. So a few years later they end up listening to Mozart.
Yes.
Why not? I mean, there's no right way to do it. And one idea that was really fairly central to my book, The Rest Is Noise, was to offer such a kind of threshold, a sort of point of entry, especially for those who had grown up with pop, hadn't necessarily been indoctrinated into classical music, and were sort of looking for a way in.
I like the idea of listening to more sort of atonal, difficult, more different music as a sort of granting permission to return to melody.
I know, yeah. Well, I was reading a lot of Adorno at the time, so if it wasn't atonal, then it wasn't acceptable to me. Yeah. But I've sort of broadened out a bit since then.
And I have to say, like, listening to music and talking to music this morning and sharing things that we both love to an audience of strangers is far, far less terrifying than being on a Radiohead tour bus and playing something I like to my 4 friends in the band. This is a cakewalk in comparison. Right,
yeah. Well, Colin had some very entertaining stories that he's not consenting, alas,
No, we can't share those.
But let's get into the question of technology a bit, because this is something that's very much on everyone's minds. And so you've been in Radiohead long enough now that you've seen a whole world change all around you. And
that's right.
Right back at the beginning,
that's right.
You were, but just as Radiohead were starting out, you were working in a place called a record store, where you could walk in. Some of the younger people may not be familiar.
People would actually pay money for CDs.
Yes,
with music on them.
Quite interesting.
Now they just pay.
And so there's been this huge change, and right around 2000, 2001 was just at the time that Radiohead was undergoing this transition. I mean, the whole world was changing all around us, and digital music and the quote unquote sharing of music over the internet was altering the whole record industry. So I mean, I don't want to ask too ridiculously broad a question, but do you feel that the music itself has remained unaltered, just sort of the fundamental ritual of making music and listening to music, or have the technological changes really begun to sort of reshape our perceptions of music on some kind of deeper organic level?
Yeah, well, I think
that is ridiculously broad, but
if we talk about listening to music, everything is like all the contours have been like shaved off now, so everything is available all the time. So you could listen to, everything that you write, all the playlists from your book, can be presented in a sort of ahistorical, not teleological way, and just so anything can follow anything else. And I think that. My concern is now that you get what you pay for, and if you're not paying for it, then you're not going to get much. And all the sort of traditional forms of patronage and support from like record companies and EMI lent us against our advance. I think it was like £30,000 to buy a rusty white van and a drum kit, and support venues that only 6 people came to see us play in. And through that, we learned how to do it better. And all those traditional forms of support, I think, have been eroded. And alongside, the ways of finding out about music through sort of gatekeepers and arbiters of taste and curators, cultural curators. For me, people like John Peel, I suppose, or Annie Nightingale, or people who wrote about classical music in The Listener back in the day. So. I'm not sure where all those points of departure for people who want to find out about it, which is why your book and writing and the CDs and the playlists that you made were so important.
Yeah, I guess there's a question of could the Radiohead, if you all were sort of springing up magically in your youth right now,
yes.
It just couldn't happen in the same way. I guess it could still happen magically somehow, but you wouldn't have. It would be so much more difficult to have the record company giving you a bit of money and a bit of time to develop.
Yes, exactly.
So now, I guess if you acquire a cult following, you can sort of do it yourself in a sense without a record company's help, or sort of start your own company. But it does seem as though we've lost this middle ground to some extent. I've just been reading some interesting articles. Califasana, a New Yorker writer, wrote a piece about the Blockbuster in the New Yorker a few weeks ago. There's a book of that title by Anita Elbersy, Blockbusters. And I guess around 10 years ago, 8 years ago, people were talking a lot about the idea of the long tail. Chris Anderson wrote a book of that title, and a sort of optimistic assessment that the internet and digital culture would enable, because now you can sort of get hold of everything so easily. You wouldn't be so reliant on a few blockbusters, on sort of these giant acts, giant movies, bands, and so on, that you could sort of have a business model that would include sort of this accumulation of just lots of people pursuing their niche interests. And so someone buys one copy of the complete player piano pieces of Colin and Crow, and someone else buys Heidegger, and
everyone's taste is catered for.
It all accumulates, and that model hasn't quite worked out, it seems. And there's sort of now big questions about that long tail theory, and blockbusters seem to be more with us than ever, and this kind of winner takes all economy is still so powerful, maybe more powerful than ever. And yes, all that stuff is out there, and you can get hold of it. But especially this middle ground, I think Califa talked about the disappearance of the middle, and that's right where Radiohead started out, being signed by a big label, for sort of a small amount at first, but being given the resources to sort of start from there and become this phenomenon, which reaches a huge audience and yet remains somewhat off to the side of real, pop culture in the classic sense.
Yes.
Does that all make sense?
Yes, it does. And I think, but I think performance is live performance. I mean, that's the one thing that's not. That's like the festival that you've curated this year. Just the opportunity to hear live performances. That's something that's not going to go away, and has some kind of value, and everything else seems to have become friable and slipped away and eroded, and corners have been cut, and I'm sounding like really gloomy about it all now. but at the same time, the fact that you can listen to Haas or Peter Grimes and make these different connections between all these sort of what was new music or strange music, but it's as valid as listening to the Beatles, or it can be presented to anyone who might be curious about any kind of music. Yeah. That's definitely changed.
So you came here to see Peter Grimes in September, right? And you were quite struck by it.
Utterly, it was incredibly gripping, and then also came to see Ligeti 2001 live performance for the orchestra, which was again just enthralling and just a wonderful thing that you would want anyone to see, which sounds crazy, really. But Ligeti, for me, like, you introduced me to Ligeti's music, and I can remember. Memory is very obviously important with music. I can remember all the times when I've listened to piano etudes, and it's just fabulous.
What does classical music need to do to bring in more people like you? I mean, in a sense that it's back in America, there's this wonderful phrase that people have used in the classical business, the culturally aware non-attender. The culturally aware non-attender is the person who's just generally very smart, very very educated, reads contemporary novels, goes to art films, listens to sort of the more obscure pop music, and sort of reads the TLS and this kind of thing, but really has never paid much attention to classical music. It just sort of dropped off the menu of what smart people were paying attention to. And this describes so many of my friends from college as well, who were smarter than I was, but who just had never heard of Alban Berg, and I was outraged, and would sort of sit them down and force them to listen to the three pieces for orchestra, and they would sit there and say, isn't this sort of horror movie music? And I was like, no. And so go on from there. But so from your perspective, and yes. I mean, you did actually grow up in as you said, a kind of a classical music household, but then maybe yes. you peeled away from it a little bit as you grew older, and now you're sort of drifting back, perhaps. But what needs to be done?
Needs to be done. What must be done? I think that I think like shared playlists of music, and I just think excited conversations with friends and telling people what you like and being able to share that. I don't think it's anything more than that.
Do you think there's anything particularly wrong with the presentation of classical concerts? I mean, a lot of people have these theories that there need to be flashing lights, and people need to be able to sort of tweet throughout the performance and this kind of thing.
No, I think that sounds. I love Radio 3. I love how Radio 3 explores classical music by getting people in and sharing their enthusiasms and their tastes, and using that as a form of biography as well, as we did when we started this conversation. And I think that's, to share music that means something to you and is very important to you, and to hope that it has a similar effect upon another person's life is a form of, the good thing about the digital world is easier forms of communication. I think that's the most important thing, really, and because we're going back to taste. Because when you tell someone something about the music that matters to you, you're telling them something about yourself. And I think, then going back to live performance, the power of like John Franson's book How to Be Alone. I think he talks about or the idea of like you can see a concert and you can be like 50 people, or you could be like at a Radiohead concert occasionally, so like 20,000 people. But when the music's happening in a communal space, you can feel that it's just being there for you. And for you alone as well. So that's so powerful, and that's something that's very important to me.
Yeah, well, I think it just showing a bit more passion, I think, is very much the key, and it doesn't need to be anything sort of excessive or vulgar. But it just makes a world of difference, I think, if there's some sense of conviction on the part of those presenting a concert and those playing. I mean, I always feel that if the players on stage really believe in what they're doing, audiences, which are very good mind readers, pick up on that immediately. So, I mean, the other night here with London Sinfonietta playing In Vain, the conviction, the tension evident from the stage that sort of went straight out into the audience, and just everyone was absolutely on the edge of their seats, especially when the lights turned out.
And also, like, music is a way of describing the history. I think you told me the story about Stalin and the recording the other evening, which I'd love that if you could share that, tell everyone that story.
Well, this is sort of it's sort of somewhat apocryphal story that was told about Stalin listening to the radio and hearing the I think it was the Mozart 21st or 23rd piano concerto, and he enjoyed it and called up the station and asked for the recording to be sent to him. And the problem was it was a live radio performance. There was no recording, so they had to stay up all night making one, an edition of a single recording to be sent to Stalin. Maria Udina was the pianist, and they tried several times. One conductor was so petrified that he couldn't move, and another one kept messing up in the middle of the performance. And finally, they made this one recording, sent it off to Stalin. So that was an interesting moment in recorded history, if it happened. We only have a few more minutes. As Jude mentioned, the London Sinfonietta need to come on to start their rehearsal. But I wanted to ask you about this trip to South Africa.
Yes.
That you made earlier this year. And that must have been an incredible experience.
It was an incredible experience, and I was with this charity called Children's Radio Foundation, and one of the things that came out of the trip was I presented a show on South African music for BBC Radio 6. And we spoke about this when I saw the other guys in the band the other night, and it was like to have the framework of music to explore and to play. I did a sort of mini survey of South African music from 1940s to present day, and presented the playlist of it because the other thing, of course, is music's happening everywhere, and during the last 150 years, not just in Europe and America, but that was a fantastic experience to have, and I learned a lot about a lot of great musicians and artists who made their music. And they were funded, and in fact, a friend of mine who's here from Stern Music, the World Music, he gave me lots of really interesting information about what happened, because the music was recorded during the apartheid era, and then the recordings were taken to London and were pressed, and then the pressings were, records were sent back down to South Africa and recorded, were sold, and some of those records obviously stayed in England and were sold in music shops like Stern's Music and in London, and so you had all these great artists and musicians who were making all this incredible music, and a lot of that's been swept away post-apartheid, because there's been a sort of I suppose flattening of music, and when we did a program about it with BBC Six, and interviewed some young people in South Africa now who complained about the fact that all music was like hip hop and bling and American influences, and there were this sort of islands of expression had gone, and these are young kids on the street. These aren't sort of crusty old fogies like me, complaining about it. But so there was it was a fantastic thing, and the playlist is still up on BBC Six, and
it's another perhaps underside of technology emerging there, in that sort of everything is sort of instantly available all over the world, but this can have a flattening effect, a sort of homogenizing effect.
Yes.
As sort of a single, well-marketed sort of...
Nothing comes from anywhere anymore.
Yeah,
so
and regional differences and
that's gone,
erodes
swept away.
Differences. So that's something we always need to be conscious of. Let's just sort of 3 or 4 minutes remaining, but perhaps we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience, if possible. Yes, over there.
You touched on this in the middle of your discussion, but the means by which artists get supported and paid for is crucial throughout the history of art, plastic arts and music, and written forms too. The different ways in which you can make a career in the two varieties of music are surely the key to the distinction between the kinds. And to respond, an audience response to Alex's point about what can we do about classical music, I tell you one thing I'd love to be able to do in a classical concert is to move. We're in these formal situations, and yet they're full of rhythms and movements and delights of all kinds that you like to express yourself to. I'd like a different space in which to hear these things.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I often have that urge. I think sort of last night during the more rhythmic sections of Thomas Addis's Asila, but it's something that's very much frowned upon. But it wasn't always the case. I mean, I think in the 19th century, accounts of audience behavior give a sense that sort of if people were very moved by a particular passage of Berlioz or Wagner, they would sort of get up and start gesticulating madly. So perhaps it would be good to have a little more of that. But it's hard to sort of make that step. The first person to get up and start dancing during Beethoven's 7th Symphony is going to be a very brave individual. and it is such a clear divide between sort of how pop audiences behave and how you can actually have something that's sort of quite moody and melancholy happening in a pop song, and sort of everyone is sort of swaying to it a bit, and in a classical concert something sort of much sort of rhythmically stronger in fact is happening, and yet everyone's sort of absolutely still.
There's in my favorite books by someone called Elizabeth Colbert, I think, called Soundscape Modernity, and she's like a academic who writes about concert halls, and people build concert halls. And they didn't know that the cheap seats were like the ones in the middle on the balcony, but they were actually the acoustic. They found out they were the best space to hear music from, and then that's I just that's. Just playing, and we played here as well. We played in this room, and it was it just acoustically it was very unforgiving, So, but I saw this sort of static nature of what and it is. Being on tour, it's a similar thing with Radiohead, I suppose. It's very it's a very fixed thing with a big production and stuff, So,
one other very quick question, perhaps.
I wanted to ask about, and I've kind of been having a conversation with friends about this before, but there's kind of a divide between people who make music because they want to make music because they see it as an art and they want to make something that, you know, people appreciate, or because they want to make music. And there's kind of a almost cynical nature now sometimes where people make music as a product. And I was wondering sort of what you think about the divide between, you know, those two sort of approaches to making music, if that makes sense.
I think that if you're going back to technology, I think the technology sort of puts you onto those tracks of making certain kinds of music, you know, and you know, my kids, I've got like 10-year-old kid, and he was playing me this music that he's made on the laptop, and it's just going to sort of GarageBand sound files like jammed together and stuff, and you know, and I'm thinking, flashing back to myself and my brother when we were like playing recorder and guitar together at the same age, you know, like jamming, and
we want to hear that record.
Yeah, you don't want to hear that record. You know, and that's my idea of making music when we were kids, was like making something that hadn't been pre-recorded by like session players on the West Coast, you know, and then put into sound files so that you could like speed up or slow down, and then, you know, and then you proudly like show that as your composition and stuff. But I think that's great, you know, that's fine too. But yeah, so that would be more product, I suppose.
Well, alas, I think we do need to wrap it up. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Jude. And enjoy the rest of the day here at South Bank.